My name is Todd Miranda. In this video, I'm going to demonstrate how to use attached properties to simulate additional functionality in a WPF application. So let's begin in Microsoft Visual Studio 2008. We'll choose File, New, Project. We'll create a WPF application and we'll name it accordingly. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to have some data that we're going to bind into some controls. So let's go to our code behind for this class, and we're going to add, let's go down here and let's add a class. So we'll say public class, and we're just going to call this widget. And in there we're going to have a couple of properties. So we're going to do public int item amount. So we'll have an amount for a particular widget. And this is the item amount for that widget. So we'll do a default constructor there, or a default accessor set there. And then we've got another int, which will be a threshold amount. And we'll say, for this example, that in order to change the item amount for this particular type of widget, it has to exist within a certain threshold of the original item amount. So we'll just say for this functionality that we can change the item amount, but it has to stay within a certain threshold. And that's what we'll use this. So we'll have the original item amount and we'll have the threshold that that particular item can be changed. Alright, so when we load this form, let's go ahead and do a window loaded. So we'll go back over to our XAML and we'll say loaded equals, and let it go ahead and create a new event handler for us. And we'll go to our back end, and in our code behind we'll simply say that some text box, we don't know what that is yet, some text box, and we're going to set its data context. So this is going to be its data context, and that's going to be equal to, I know that doesn't exist yet, we'll come back and change it, new widget, and we'll come in here and we'll say item amount equals, so the original amount was say $25, and then the threshold, we can change that within $10. So we can go to within $10 of that, or we can go beyond, somewhere beyond $10 of that, within $10. Alright, so let's go back, let's create our text box and then come back over here and change the name of our text box. So let's go to our XAML, we'll go to the toolbox, we'll grab a text box and put it on our form, and we'll just put it somewhere right here in the middle. And we'll name it text amount 1. So let's go back over here, change this to text amount 1. Alright, now we're going to go back over to our XAML and let's do some binding. So the first thing that we want to bind in this is the text property. So I'm going to give us a little bit more room here for our XAML. And in our text property, we're going to say that this is equal to a binding expression. So we're going to say binding path equals, and this is where we're going to say the path equals item amount. So that's the property of our object that we're binding in here to our text box. Alright, so that looks pretty good so far. Now then, we need a way to track. We said we could change the amount within a certain threshold of the original amount. So we're going to put the original amount as the text property of our text box. But we have to find a way to track the original amount. We need to know the original amount. So let's just use another property that we can use to store some additional data in, and that's the tag property. And the tag property has been around for a while in a lot of different controls in Windows forms, and it's a really nice property to be able to just kind of use as a way to carry around some additional data. So we're going to bind this as well. So we're going to use a binding expression here, and it's actually going to be the same binding expression. This is going to be item amount, but there's one difference. Whenever we change the text property of our text box, we don't want the tag property to be updated by what's being set in the item amount property of the item that's being bound to this. So we don't want this to be two-way binding effectively. We want this to be one-way binding. So the way we do that is we come in here and we say path, we do mode equals one time. So we want this to effectively be bound one time, effectively when the text box is created, and then don't bind it anymore. So we keep the original value in there no matter what the text property or the property item amount of our item or our object is set to. Okay, so that gives us our amount, and it gives us our original amount that we can keep track of. But you know what? We've got one other piece of information. We've got the threshold amount that we need to keep up with. But we don't have another tag property. We don't have another property like that. So this is where attached properties can come in and be really kind of nice. So since we've already effectively used the tag property, we can use an attached property that really doesn't have anything to do with the functionality of the text box as a way to store some additional data. It's kind of hijacking the attached property for data storage. So we're going to use the canvas.top. Since we're not using a canvas, we're actually inside a grid, the canvas.top property really is not being used. So we're going to bind here path equals threshold. So as you can see, we've kind of hijacked the canvas.top property as a place to store some additional data. Well, that's great. That's using an attached property to store some additional data, but we talked about using an attached property to simulate some additional functionality. So let's take our text box just one step further. Let's say that we want to set the textbox.background color, and we want the background color to be sensitive to the rules around the item amount and the threshold. So we're going to have to do some binding, and we're also going to have to build a converter for that. So let's do our textbox.background, and we're going to build into our background property. We're going to actually do a multi-binding with a converter, and we're going to take some values into that converter and then be able to do some things with it. So let's go ahead and build this converter. So we're going to right click on our project. We're going to do add, or we'll go up here to project. We'll do add class. So we're going to add a class to our project, and this is going to be our converter class. So let's just call this threshold rule converter. And that'll be a class. We'll do add. So let's open that up. Alright, so now we're going to take out a couple of these namespaces we don't need. We're going to add in a couple that we're going to use. I think we'll use windows.data, and we will be needing to use system.windows.media as well to get some of our color information. Okay, so here's our class. Now our class is going to inherit from a multi-value converter, and then we're going to right click on that, and we're going to allow Studio to implement the interface for us. So we'll say implement interface, and it's going to do the two methods that we have to implement, convert and convert back. Now convert back we're not going to worry about because we're effectively worried about just one-way binding with this. So we're going to be dealing with the convert method. So let's go in here and let's just let's see. We'll do solid color brush, and we'll do a not valid color, and that's going to be equal to new solid color brush color dot, or colors dot, let's do red. That's our not valid color. And then we'll do solid color brush. We'll have a teeter color, or maybe we'll call that an equal color, and that's equal to new solid color brush, and this will be colors dot yellow. We'll do the classic red, yellow, and green. So solid color brush, this is going to be valid color equals new solid color brush colors dot green. Now what we're doing here is we're creating default colors for the different colors that our text box background is going to be. So these are default colors. They can be overridden, and we'll look at how they can be overridden in just a moment. So there's our default color values. So now let's convert any incoming colors that are coming in as parameters, and we'll add those and override our colors that we just created here. So let's say if parameter is not equal to null, and this is the parameter value coming in can be passed, this object here comes in from the actual binding statement that we're going to put in our XAML. So this is how you can pass parameters into a converter. So we'll say string array colors, and we'll say this is just going to be parameter dot toString dot split. We'll cheat, and we'll pass these in as a comma separated list of colors, just because that's kind of easy to do. And then we'll convert that. So we'll do a brush converter. Color converter equals new brush converter. If colors.length, so if we actually have some colors coming in as parameters, then we'll say, and we may not have gotten all the parameters, so we don't want to make any assumptions. So we'll say if the length is greater than 0, we know we have at least the not valid color. So we'll say not valid color equals color converter dot convert from, and do convert from string, that is, and then we'll just do colors 0. Alright, so just kind of taking an easy way out, and you're going to pass those colors in. We'll copy this, and we'll say if colors.length is greater than 1, that means we have at least 2, and this will be equal color equals color converter, convert from string, colors 1, and then we'll do the last color that we're interested in. If colors is greater than or equal or greater than 2, this should be valid color. Valid color, that is. Alright. Okay, so that gets our color parameters that are coming in, if we have color parameters, and we've kind of cheated and found a way to say that we may not have all the parameters coming in, so we're going to assign the colors that we do have coming in. Now let's start working with the actual values coming in. So the first thing we want to do is check and make sure that we have all the values that we expect. So we're going to pass 3 values in. So we're going to say if values.length is less than 3, then we're going to return not valid color, because remember, this is a converter for colors, so we want to return the color that we're going to set the background of our text box to. Alright, so if we have 3 values, then let's do our try catch block here, and in here we're going to say if values 0, And we want to make sure that our values are set to something. We want to make sure that they're not just unset values. And the reason we don't know this is we're binding the properties that we're going to pass into our converter. So we don't know what those properties may be. It's possible they could be bound to some type of a null value. So we're going to say if values 0, our first value, is not equal. We know how many values we've got. We've checked the length, or we know we've at least got the 3, is equal to system.windows. I'm just going to fully qualify this. Dependency property dot unset value. So if values 0 is not an unset value and values 1 is not equal to system.windows.dependencyProperty.unset value and values finally 2 is not equal to system.windows.dependencyProperty.unset value. So if we have valid values in all of those, then let's say int new val, which is going to be the new value, is, let's just do a system.convert. Notice how I have to fully qualify convert? Well, it's because we actually have a method here in our class called convert, so we don't want to confuse it. So system.convert, .to int 32, and we want to convert values, and we're going to pass in, if we do whichever order we do, we'll do it that way. That way we can pass in the old value first, then we'll pass in the threshold, and then we'll pass the new value in to check against that. Alright, so that is our new value. We have an old value, and we said that was going to come in first. And finally we have a threshold value, so we'll just call this thresh value, and that'll be our second item that comes in. Alright, so now we have our items. Now let's do our logic. So if new value is greater than old value and new value minus old value is less than or equal to our thresh value. Alright, so we're effectively saying if new value is greater than old value and it's within the threshold amount, then we do a return valid color. Now we also need to check else if new val is equal to old val, because we have that equal color. That is return equal color. And then finally our else will be return not valid color. Alright, so that way if they're good, we'll do the valid color. If they're equal, we'll do the equal color. If they're not, we'll do the not valid color. And then if these are not true, we'll do an else. And we'll say return not valid color. And if we get an exception, we don't really care what it is. We're just going to return a not valid color. And then if something should happen, we fall all the way through. I don't even know if that's possible, but without looking at it a whole lot, we'll just assume that it could be possible. We'll just return not valid color. So there is our converter. So let's go back to our XAML now, and let's come up here into our window class. And in order to use our converter, we have to add a reference here. So we'll add a reference to our local namespace. And then we'll come into our window.resources, and we'll do local threshold rule converter x key equals rule converter. So now we have our converter that we can use in our code. So let's go down to our background now. Here's where we're going to do our multi-binding. So we'll do a multi-binding. Multi-binding. We'll do converter equals, let's give us a little bit more room here. Converter equals our static resource, and we'll call this rule converter because that's what we named it up above here in our resources. And now we're going to pass the converter parameter. This was the parameter that we had talked about. This is what we said we were going to kind of cheat at. So we'll pass in red, yellow, green. So that's our parameters. So we can override our default colors using those colors there. Now, in a multi-binding, we have multiple actual binding elements. So mode on these is going to be one way. We're doing one-way binding. Relative source is going to be relative source self, because we're looking at this since the binding is within the text box itself. And path equals tag. So this is going to be our original value, if you remember, that we pass in. Alright, now we have another binding, mode one way, relative source is self, but this is going to take the canvas.top attached property, and notice the syntax here, we put this in paren since it's an attached property. And finally, relative source self, and the path will be text. So this is our new value. So there's our multi-binding to set our background. Alright, let's build our project, see if there's any problems with it. Oh, yep, we got a couple of errors. And that's right, we did our convert, but we didn't say color 0 as solid color brush. It'd be kind of hard to convert that if we didn't tell it what type it was. Okay, so we'll build. And build started, progress, build succeeded. Let's run this. Okay, so here's our window. Since our initial value is the same as the original value, we get a background of yellow. If I change this to, say, 20, I get a background of red. If I change this to 30, which is within 10 above 25, I get green. So you can see that we've been able to change the functionality of the text box using a custom converter and an attached property to store additional data and facilitate the additional functionality of being able to do some rules around our text box and carry that data directly in the text box itself.